Talk and Power, your motorsport and motoring radio show. Now on 88.5 FM, The Valley Comes Alive. And podcasting across iTunes and talkandpower.com.au.
Welcome to another episode of the Talk and Power podcast. We're up to episode 142, and I've got a guest with us that we've been meaning to have on for some time. He's going to be talking all things WASMA tonight, but we'll touch a bit on some of his other accolades as well, I guess. Welcome to Chris Bitmead. Chris, thanks for coming along on the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Nick. It's great to be here, and I love talking about all things automotive, so this suits me down to the ground.
Oh, cool. Look, we met through a mutual friend of ours, a friend on the podcast as well, Johnny Alardi. So we should shout out to Johnny. And so I know I met you a few years ago now, but we sort of hang in the same circles, I guess. So I enjoy going on some of the events that you hold as well. And we'll talk about that shortly. But look, I mean, I guess while tonight we're going to be talking about you represent WASMA, but before we kick off with WASMA, let's just touch base a little bit about in terms of your past, in terms of cars, and where this obsession came from.
It started back probably when I was at school, primary school, high school, I can't remember, where I used to actually do up a bike, like for competitions and stuff like that. And so always love fiddling around with things mechanical. Mm-hmm. It's never been a job of mine. It's always been a passion though. So when I left school and got a job, not too long after that, I bought my first project, which was a 1954 FJ Holden. Mm-hmm. And it was just a car I bought as a bare shell, a bit of a theme there, as you'll probably hear about later on. But yeah, bought as a bare shell, and that car took me, I think, 4 years to do up. It was a nice car for its day. It was back in the mid '80s when I did that, and that car ended up winning top judge at Motivation in 1987, I think. That was before Bam Bam brought his awesome HQ out and really lifted the bar over WA in terms of show cars. So that was good fun.
Talk us through Motivation, because a lot of people think it's a show of recent years, but as we had Richie Howlett on the podcast quite a few episodes ago, and we've spoken to Bam Bam as well, that show goes back quite a significant number of years now, and is really the pinnacle of Western Australian shows, isn't it?
Oh, it is very much so. And so, like I say, I was at Motivation in like 86 or 87. Like I say, my memory is a bit foggy now. But it was a great event, and that was back in the days when they had it at Cannington, at the Greyhound track at Cannington. Yep. And then they used another oval out the back for doing the driving events. So, obviously the show then moved on to Burswood after that, which was a big step up, and there were other shows at Belmont Racecourse. Mm-hmm. And then of course Motorplex. I mean, Motorplex is a fantastic venue, and really the only place where you can hold an event of that caliber, where you've got show and shine, plenty of room for show and shine, plus plenty of room for people doing cruising. And we really seen the show change over the years. Advent of burnouts and stuff like that, where in the early days the burnouts were almost a bit of a demonstration type thing, whereas now it's pretty much a staple of the show.
Isn't it funny? Like Motivation's kind of become a business as well, for promoters to get involved and not necessarily make a heap of money, but it's a business to them now, isn't it?
It was interesting because I remember when I actually won top judge at Motivation, I went and picked up the trophies. I actually didn't even attend the trophy presentation there. It was a 2-day event, and I was only there for one of the 2 days, I think. Anyway, so I missed the trophy presentation. I went and picked them up afterwards, and they said to me, next year we're thinking of introducing prize money to the event. I went, I don't know if that's such a good idea. It'll take it away from being a hobby type show into something that's more serious. Anyway, I think they did that, and the world changed after that. But Motivation wasn't the only show to do that. A lot of other shows around the country were making similar changes at that time too.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I think sometimes we can weigh up the pros and cons of prize money, but I think we've seen a number of clubs and event promoters putting on prize money to attract maybe a higher caliber of entrant. But I agree with you. I don't necessarily think that's required, but I think that's how they pitch their show, I guess.
I think so. Yeah, they probably feel they need to do that to attract the best cars to the shows. I mean, I always believe that people build the cars for themselves. And I actually used to be involved in the running of the Hot Rod Show in Perth, and at one stage I remember promoting the idea of paying people or giving out prize money for displays. My thinking was that your displays are there for the show, but the cars are there for the owners and for them to appreciate as a vehicle more so than the showpiece.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, speaking of top quality cars in car shows, Xboss, tell us a bit about how. I know we don't want to focus too much on that. I think we should have you on another time and talk about Xboss, but just give us a brief on Xboss and how that car came to be.
Yeah, sure. So before Xboss, I built and I still own it, actually, a 1932 Ford three-window coupe, which was, I think, a 6-year build for me. And that was a car that, did well in show, went to Maguire Superstars and was a finalist there. And so really, I felt that I'd achieved what we could achieve in Australia in terms of show cars. And I really then wanted to build another car that I wanted to actually take to America to do a power tour with. So bought this XB Falcon Coupe as a shell, and we sort of got into starting modifying that. John Gilbert, who's an awesomely talented sort of metal man, he got involved with it. He previously worked on a car a lot of people know as Mercules, which is a Ford Mercury, like awesome custom car built here in WA. Anyway, so John was probably the catalyst as to why it went from being a power tour car to a car that we took to the Ridler Award. John wanted to do a custom interior, and initially I sort of resisted it, and then we sort of went along with the idea, and one thing led to another, and the next thing we were building a car that was going to be a Ridler contender. So for me, a lot of people, when they build cars, it's all about the end result. But for me, I think it's more about the journey of building the car and the mateship you have with it. And, you have some awesome times when you're putting the car together and building the car with people and handcrafting it. And you have some times that aren't so good, when things aren't going right or there's some disappointment, which happens. So you experience all those emotions in the building of a car. But certainly, when it's finished and when car gets recognised and the accolades it gets, it certainly makes it all worthwhile. That you're able to share that journey with some people that are equally share the same passion.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree with that. And I know there was a group of people that came together on that car, and car that went really around the world, didn't it? And the Ridler Award, there's no, I think you made top 2 in Ridler, was it? Or
at the officially there's a grade 8. So they award 8 cars. So those 8 cars from a show of about 900 then get to compete for the Ridler Award, and there's one winner. So effectively, there's one winner and there's 7 runner-ups.
Okay.
The official thing. But unofficially, they told us that we were at the pointy end of the runner-ups, so to speak. So whether that's 2nd, 3rd, 4th, I don't know. It was certainly at the pointy end of the field. There are a lot of punters there at the show who actually thought that we're in for a great shot for actually winning. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. For anyone that's listening, we urge them to go to Google, just type in Xboss. It comes up straight away. It's like ranks. That's how high it ranks. It's there. There's numerous photos of the car. I think even your 32 Coupe comes up there as well, and a myriad of cars that you've had. Tell us, these days you're involved with the Mustang Owners Car Club of WA. Great club, I must say. Very active in the scene in All Ford Day and a number of other shows that they do. Tell us a little bit about the Mustang Owners Car Club.
Yeah, the Mustang Owners. In fact, my wife actually joined the Mustang Owners Club before I did. That was when she was a bit of a widow from being a car builder. So I was in the shed at nights and stuff like that, and she wanted something to do. So Colleen at the time had a nice 2007 Shelby GT500. So she actually joined the club and was their secretary and treasurer, I think, for a number of years. And then in 2012, I bought my own Mustang, which is a 1965 Fastback, which was my daily driver. And I then joined the club myself. So obviously now been in the club for about 10 years, held various roles within the club. And it's a great club. So of recent times, the club's grown, like I think most car clubs have. And we'll talk about that a bit later on for reasons why. But yeah, it is a great club and a great mix of cars, both old and new Mustangs.
Yeah, we'll talk about car clubs, as you said. We'll talk about that soon. Just recently, I want to touch on an event you held. I went along to it and I had an awesome time. And our vice president in our club came along in his Tirana as well. We both said how great that run was. Cruise to Cure, just give it a bit of a plug. You held the WA leg of that event. That's an event that's held Australia wide by Greg Maskell. Tell us a bit about that evening and the whole premise behind Cruise to Cure.
Yeah, sure. So Greg, for those who don't know, Greg painted Xboss and did all the finishing body work, him and his team. And then Greg has been the one who's transported the car around Australia when it was going and doing its shows and stuff. So him and I have become greatest of mates, and that will last until I'm in a wooden box. So but about 18 months ago, Greg sort of got a bit more serious into losing some weight and getting fitter. So he decided to start riding. So he's been getting very, very serious into his, cycling now. So he decided to do an event called Tour de Cure, which raises money for cancer research. And part of that is that each person that enters has to raise, I think it's a minimum of like $12,000 in donations or so that they can enter and actually raise some serious money for cancer research. So being a car guy, something that Greg came up with was doing a car cruise event in every state in Australia. So he's got mates all over Australia. So he leaned on us all to do our bit to help support cancer research and organise an event in our own home states that was part of almost like a national event. So so we did that. We organised an evening cruise. I think it was back in January, and I always like to do something a bit different. I'm one for making sure that people don't do the same thing all the time. I think it can get a bit stale. People like doing that first few times, and then they sort of lose interest. So we organised a cruise that I don't think anyone had been to a start point that we started at up at Greenwood there, and cruised down through the coast and ended up with some pizzas and food down in Willerton. So it was a really nice cruise, and I think those that came along really enjoyed it. We had a bit of a raffle and gave away a few prizes. But importantly, I think for this Perth event, I think we raised about $1,000 for Greg's charity, which was fantastic. I think overall he ended up raising about $15,000 or $17,000, from the various events that he'd held around Australia, plus his own fundraising that he'd done through his own contacts. So it was a great event, great fun. We sort of, a few of us, because we enjoyed it, said to Greg, maybe we should do something, regardless of whether you do Tour de Cure. Maybe we should do a Cruise to Cure every year. I think it would be a good fun thing to do.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I agree 100%. It was a great evening, and it was great to get out and about. And I think the run, you did a magnificent job with the run. I really enjoyed that, driving in that particular way. And we all managed to stay together as well, quite a few cars, and really had a great evening. I want to touch on WASMA now. We'll get stuck into WASMA. The acronym stands for Western Australian Street Machine Association. By street machiners for street machiners. So tell us a little bit about your involvement with this relatively new organisation here in Western Australia.
Sure, but as part of that, I'll probably have to go back a little bit. So I've been working with a group of other guys since about 2015 or 16, which is the Australian Street Machine Federation of WA. And we came together as a bit of a group to work with Department of Transport. There's a lot of discontent around what you can and can't do with modified vehicles, and some inconsistencies or reinterpretation of rules and guidelines.
Yep.
And it's fair to say there was a fair bit of frustration around the general motoring enthusiast community around that. So as ASMFWA, we sort of held a number of meetings with Department of Transport, but fair to say we're probably slow in getting a lot of traction around that. So then a group of other people led by Mick Rack called out to the motoring community to see whether we could do something and create a stronger voice, so that groups like ASMFWA could get a bit of attention, or have people listening to them when we were speaking. So that's probably there was a meeting held at a hotel in Midland, I think, and we went along to that, and there were probably 60 or 70 people there, all I guess voicing their discontent at sort of the difficulties that they'd had in getting modified vehicles approved and so forth. So so that's where WASMA started, as being an organisation that had a broader voice for street machiners in WA. So much like the CMC is a voice for all the the vintage and veteran car clubs and some of the more modern clubs, but there was no one really representing the modified vehicle scene. So that's where WASMA was born out of that.
Yeah. So tell us, in WASMA, we have some pretty talented people, if I may say so myself. So Mark Happy Williams, and I guess who doesn't know Mark, Perry Ormsby, Mick Rack, as you just mentioned before, Mick Allender, Steve Thomas, yourself as technical, you're the chairman for the technical committee. Yep. Talk us through some of these, Vicky Wilder as well. Talk us through some of these guys and girls that are in WASMA.
First and foremost, they're all motoring enthusiasts. Okay, so none of the names you mentioned have a vested interest in a business that's relies on street machines or anything like that. They're just motoring enthusiasts that have a passion for cars and modified cars in particular. Yeah, and they just want to see more and more modified cars out and about, and people enjoying and cruising in them. So that's probably the key thing about the WASMA, the membership and the people in particular that you've just mentioned. Yeah, they're all very, very passionate about the scene and to see this. They don't want to see the scene die, and they want to see it grow and prosper as much as I do.
Yeah, no, definitely. And some of those people there that we just mentioned, like Mark Happy Williams, Summernats Grand Champion, and I know some of these guys and yourself there in the WASMA committee have done a magnificent job, and they're not just people, sitting in chairs and sitting in ivory towers, I guess you'd say. They're actual people on the ground actually doing, working on cars in their spare time. They probably don't have much spare time these days, I would have thought, with running an organisation like this. But it's important that we have these people in these positions. So just give us a rundown of the premise of WASMA. You don't hold club events, but WASMA is more of a peak body for other street machine type car clubs.
Correct. Yeah. So the when WASMA was first sort of developed, there was a concern from a lot of the motoring clubs that WASMA was going to take members away from them, and that's certainly not what WASMA is about. WASMA wants to be the peak body that represents modified car clubs and street machines in WA. So at the moment, I think that there's about 12 or 13 clubs that are affiliated with WASMA, and we're hoping that grows as we get the word out. To create that bigger voice amongst the motoring enthusiasts. So there's been a lot of traction with some stuff with WASMA. So first of all, on the technical side, because that's probably the bit where I sort of fit into WASMA, we're now having regular meetings with the Department of Transport. So and WASMA and ASMFWA are a part of that, even though I sort of wear two hats there, one for WASMA and one for ASMFWA. So there's two hats there, and we've gone from a situation where it was almost like an adversarial relationship where no one really wanted to talk to one another, to the point where we're actually having good collaborative meetings, very constructive. We understand where DOT have concerns, and they understand where we have concerns, and they're willing to talk about those concerns with us. So. Like everything, though, things don't happen as quickly as what a lot of people might like. But I can assure people that things are working in a good direction at the moment.
Do you think there's a preconceived notion out there in the scene, in the street machine scene, that Department of Transport are against modifications? I think it's actually probably quite the opposite if we dig down. But do you think out there in the scene, we need to, probably one of your first tasks would be to dispel that myth?
I think the concern is, and that's probably something that a lot of street machiners don't understand, is that there is an element of people who drive, let's say, modified cars, or what look like a modified car, and they don't do the right thing out on the street. So politicians get a lot of complaints from people regarding hoon behaviour, and unfortunately, a lot of people can't distinguish between someone who's doing the wrong thing in a bunky old car that might have a set of old mags in it. They see that as a street machine. Whereas we've sort of done a lot of work to try and say that these people who spend a lot of money modifying their cars, they're car enthusiasts. They're not the hoons. So that's been a really difficult one, because on the one hand, the guys at the Department of Transport get comments from ministers and other members of Parliament whose constituents are sort of complaining about behaviour of the vehicles that they see we drive. Yet we're sort of pushing the other side, saying, okay, well, we actually want to have more modifications to these cars. So that's probably the balance, and that's where they get some concerns. And I think it's fair to say that a number of years ago, in relation to the concerns where they were getting complaints through members of Parliament or whatever, they came down with a fairly heavy stick in regards to modified vehicles, and that's relaxing somewhat. They're listening to us, and we've done a lot of work behind the scenes, particularly the guys from ASMFWA in terms of data research, accident statistics, in insurance statistics, and that for modified vehicles and enthusiast vehicles to demonstrate that they just do not stack up, or they're really underrepresented in the in terms of accident statistics and so forth. Which is why a lot of insurance companies are happy to insure modified vehicles and limited use vehicles, because they represent a lower risk to them.
Look, I remember we had James McDonald and Stan Coase from the Australian Street Machine Federation on probably a couple of years ago now. And they even back then they provided some pretty damning statistics that show clearly that we'll call it our representation of vehicles were majorly underrepresented in road traffic accidents, and that that we were probably looking at the picture a little bit wrong there. But I do honestly think that when we deal a little bit myself with the Department of Transport as well, and I can see it's starting to go back the other way, and I can see that there's an acceptance now of we'll call them our vehicles, and what we do with them.
For sure. And then a lot of that relates to behaviour. I think the Department of Transport like the idea of people being in clubs, because there's almost a degree of self-policing there. If people are doing the wrong thing, they're hopeful that other club members will pull them up and or call them out on their behaviour. So definitely. If people want to go and do skids and make noise and do all that sort of stuff, well, there's events around for that. Like your motivations and your power cruisers and other events. Go and rip it up and have your fun at those events. But on the street, just be aware that people are watching, and we're all ambassadors for what we do. So,
exactly.
The last thing we need is people doing the wrong thing.
I think car clubs are really, that's where I think car clubs are really crucial today, in today's day and age. I don't want to say policing it, because car clubs shouldn't be forced to police that behavior, but ultimately for their members, they are responsible, whether they like it or not, for their members' behavior, even sometimes outside of car club events as well. We don't, as a car club, we don't necessarily want someone with perf, whatever car club, whatever it may be, on their number plate or their number plates around, ripping up the suburbs, do we?
No, we definitely don't want that. That just makes it harder and harder
Yeah.
to achieve what we're trying to achieve, with acceptance of modified vehicles.
Mm-hmm. Chris, tell us a little bit about, so let's go back a step here. I know some of the work that WASMA done, but even previously to WASMA, was getting concessions for a number of our vehicles. We do this because we were looking for a concession on our vehicles because unmodified cars that were members of car clubs were able to utilize code 404. Can you just tell us a little bit, before we get stuck into C4C, let's take a step back and look at code 404. Can you tell us a little bit about code 404?
Sure, I can. I will start off by saying I'm no expert on code 404, but certainly the essence of it is that you have limited road use. You have to be a member of a CMC affiliated car club.
Yep.
The vehicle has to be totally stock, unmodified.
Mm-hmm.
And what that allows you to do is have very cheap registration on an annual basis.
Yep.
I don't know what the amount is, but it's a fraction of the normal normal cost of registration. And you can go on club runs, and you can do limited sort of close to home type runs for like maintenance and servicing of your vehicle and so forth. So so that basically allows people, because a lot of people have a number of vehicles, they don't use them, or they only see the road every other week, or once a month, or once every few months even. So the notion of them paying sort of $700-800 a year in registration for that limited use was one that it was just effectively a windfall for the government. So
yeah, no, I understand that. So 404 had its place in the unmodified car scene, but the moment you put a set of rims and tires on that vehicle, doesn't really fit the 404 bill anymore. So people like Eddie Arachi, they went about trying to get a scheme for the modified vehicles.
Yeah, that's right. So Eddie was involved with that, along with Mick Allender and Mick Rath. They're probably the three people that were instrumental in pushing forward for a new scheme that was like a 404, but for modified vehicles. So the motoring enthusiast community owes a great deal of gratitude to those three guys.
Myself included.
Yeah, exactly. So well done to those guys. They put no one knows the effort that they put into to achieving what they were able to achieve. So well done to them. But the system that's now come out, which was announced by the government a couple of years ago, was the concessions for classics. So it's sort of similar to code 404 in that you have to be a car club member. You have to have a vehicle that's over, I think it's pre-1990. Pre-1990 vehicle, and I don't think that's a rolling date at this stage.
No, it's not. No.
Being mandated that it's pre-1990. The vehicle can be modified. Obviously, it has to be registerable and licensed, roadworthy. You get your registration costs are about a quarter of what you'd be paying on a vehicle that you can use every day. Yeah. So, that quarter roughly that cost relates to being able to use the car for a quarter of the year. So, being 60 club days and 30 private use days for the vehicle, which is probably enough for most enthusiasts. Because we are talking about people who have cars that is their second or third or fourth vehicle, where they really only drive it on weekends. So,
look, I have to be honest, Chris. I live and breathe this C4C. I went through it quite vigorously back when they released it a year ago. I actually put forward my own. At the time, Department of Transport were looking for ideas or expressions of interest, was the word that they were looking for. This was probably 2 years ago. With a group of people, we submitted something, and what we got at the end of the day was very close to what we submitted. It wasn't exactly the same, but you know what I always say, beggars can't be choosers. But I do live and breathe this C4C, so much so that a group of friends, we got together and we formed our own car club as well. Became Department of Transport approved, and here we are. We're living and breathing the C4C. So the work that these guys did is really magnificent, and we will be in debt to these people for a long time to come, because it's not just about, this is what I try and tell everyone. It's not about the cheap registration, because at the end of the day, we do much more club activities now as a result. That probably cost us more than that 75% discount. But all that aside, you ask anyone that's gone on to this and started or joined a car club as a result of this, and they'll tell you that it's I won't say a new lease on life, but a lot of these people never belonged to a car club before. So they were forced to join a car club, but as a result, I think the 75%, yep, that's great. But I think what they got out of it was a lot more in terms of community engagement and just being part of a wider community.
Very, very much so. And a lot of people who traditionally haven't been in car clubs and have thought, I don't want to have to go to a meeting every Thursday or once a Thursday a month or whatever. They sort of took a very negative attitude. But once they actually go along to the events and see that clubs are generally probably not as regimented as what some of them used to be. They really do enjoy it, and you can see that in the amount of cruises that are on now. It's also easy for clubs that there's so many events on, like your custom cars and coffee and classic cars and coffee, and just other general cruise events, Northern Steel and that. There's so many events that people can go to now, and they can cruise to those events with their other club members or meet them there. And it's a great camaraderie amongst people with a similar passion.
Yeah. Well, that Northern Steel, that's a really good example. Pete and Alison over there, Davis, the work that they've done over there in Joondalup. If you live in the Joondalup area, it's once a month, I think they do it. It's the Bunnings outside. I'm not sure if they call it Joondalup there, but it's the big Bunnings in Joondalup, I guess. That comes alive every Saturday, once a month on a Saturday night. And that is a great atmosphere there. But not only for them and the people that take their cars there, but for other people as well to come around, have a look at the cars, see what they're doing. Then those people that with the food stalls there as well, they open up, and I think it's a great. I don't think they make a living from the selling of that food on a Saturday night, but it's certainly it enhances their financial position at the end of the week. That's for sure.
It does. You look at the smile, like when you're driving on the road in your classic car or custom car. You look at the smiles when people give you the thumbs up and that. I mean, that never happens in everyone's daily driver car. So that's pretty cool. That gives you a good feeling. It's good for mental health. It's there's so many benefits to it that are probably intangible to the actual car itself. So. Yeah.
Look, we're honoured. I call it an honour. We're honoured to be invited to the Aussie Park show every year, our car club, and we have 40, 50 cars in the middle oval there. And that to me is an honour that we're asked to be part of a show that's been around for 100 years. But not only that, you should see the kids that come down and the people that come down taking photos of the cars. And then we all leave at about 6:30 through the oval, and there's people running down to the railing taking photos. It really is a magnificent atmosphere, I must say.
It is, yeah, and that's just part of the benefit of being in a club, and where you can go and do that sort of stuff together. So.
Yeah. So just in brief, I mean, C4C, we'll just go through the mandates here, but basically, cars got to be under 4.5 ton, as you said before, pre-1990, and you got to be a member of a DOT approved car club. Really straightforward, nothing too difficult. You must fill out a logbook or have an app. We'll talk about the app shortly, because I know you guys have done a lot of exciting work there with the app. It's really simple, and I think, as I said, it's not just about the 75%, it's a lot more than that. So Chris, tell us, if a DOT approved car club is offering C4C for its members, that you're encouraging these clubs to join WASMA. Can you talk us through how that works?
Yeah, sure. So WASMA has a website, and I'm sure you'll put that on your podcast there.
Yep.
So and that's probably the best way to get in. The WASMA meets, I think, on the third Thursday of every month. So the club generally meets at the Perth City Street Machine Club rooms in Cannington there.
Yep.
So we had, because of COVID restrictions, we moved it away from there for a short period of time. But the next meeting is back there in May this year.
Yep.
So we meet there. We'd like to try and get representatives at each meeting from all the clubs. I mean, ultimately, it was a group of enthusiasts that started WASMA.
Yep.
But we want to see it move forward, and we'd love to see the executive committee be made up of representatives from different clubs. That's where we think that WASMA will work the best. We really truly want it to be a voice of the clubs in WA representing modified vehicles.
Sure. For those listening to us on the radio or as a podcast as well, the website is wasma.org.au. Magnificent website, by the way. Done a magnificent job with the website. It's really, really good looking website, and it's done well. It's no surprise. Sorry, go on.
I can't take any credit at all for that, Mark.
You could have taken all the credit, Chris. But look, tell us, given you got a really good website, I can imagine, I haven't used your app, but I have seen a YouTube video of the app and it looks magnificent. So tell us, we mentioned before the logbook, requiring a logbook. I'm a little bit old school. I've got a logbook in my car and I fill it out diligently. But talk us through the app, because I think, no doubt about it, that's the way forward, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. So when the app was first developed, because we weren't quite sure when C4C was first released, what the requirements were going to be on the club to monitor, club members' usage of vehicles, and so forth. So one of the Nick, one of the WASMA members, he developed the app. It's a passion of his, doing app development and so forth. So we're very fortunate to have Nick on board to help us do that.
Yep.
And so basically the app allows, one is the users, so the drivers of each of the individual cars, to have, instead of having to fossick through and fill out a logbook, it's basically the events. All the events from the clubs are basically on your phone or computer already. And then once you actually use your vehicle for a run, it'll actually keep a tally of how many club days or how many individual days you've used over the year.
Yep.
Or indeed, if you've got a number of vehicles, you can choose any one of your own vehicles to go on that particular run on that day. So, but ultimately, it's very easy for someone at a club, if a club gets requested, and they will be, if a club gets requested by DOT to provide information on members' vehicles and runs and so forth. For a club that has all its members running around with bits of paper or a paper logbook, somehow they need to get information from the members, where as the clubs, if they've got that information, who are using the app, they can just download that information into an Excel sheet and provide that to the Department of Transport. So on the occasions when the clubs get asked to provide evidence of vehicle usage from their members, I think that's where the app will really come into its own for the club admins.
Thanks, Chris. I needed that dose of depression because I'll be the one chasing the logbooks. Anyway, we digress. We'd be mentioning the clubs that are WASMA affiliates. We probably good timely reminder to actually mention those clubs. I've got a list of them here. Let me know if there's more of them. But Perth City Street Machine Car Club, what can we say about those guys? I mean, I know quite a few of those guys over there. Magnificent Car Club. They actually, we probably should have mentioned, they actually founded Motivation, but great bunch of guys, those guys. The Monaro Car Club of WA, the VW Club of WA, Northern Steel, we just mentioned them before, Pete and Alison Davis. West Coast Vanners, the Combined Tirana Car Club of WA, been on a number of runs with those guys over the years as well. They're a great group of guys and girls. The 55, 56, 57 Chev Car Club of WA, the 49 to 59 Ford V8 Owners Club of WA, Cape Naturalist Motoring Club of Incorporated, and of course the Mustang Owners Club of WA as well. So that's quite a good list of car clubs there. But I guess you just probably, I mean, when you think about it, it's a small list, but you're starting from somewhere, aren't you?
Absolutely, but it might be a small list, but it represents, I think a few thousand, enthusiasts and vehicles, by those clubs, and we're wanting it to grow more and more. For instance, I think the CMC has over 100 clubs in it. So
yeah.
I mean, we're very much at the infancy of what we're doing. We don't profess to replace what CMC do. We would rather complement what they do and be a voice. Be a voice to government on matters that affect motoring enthusiasts.
Yep, no, definitely. So, WASMA, some of the initiatives that you guys are working on, it's not just about being a vocal or a voice for these car clubs, but there's some initiatives you're working on. I know there's a stamp duty review committee as well, and Vicky's on that committee. The aim there is to exempt stamp duty for C4C eligible vehicles. I wrote here in the notes, are you able to elaborate on this? I'm sure you can. So can you tell us, look, maybe before I ask that question, maybe just tell us about your personal stamp duty issues that they've been well documented, but can you tell us a bit about that as well?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of years ago, I got caught up in a situation where, and it related to the Falcon, the Xboss Falcon that I built, a car that I bought as a rolling shell for a bit under $9,000. But then, of course, it took me 8 years to build it. And then when you register it, it says, and I relied on the advice on the Department of Transport's website, which may have changed now. But it said that, to use the Red Book value for the value of a vehicle. So I used the highest Red Book value for the make and model of my car. And that was fine. Got the car registered, paid the appropriate stamp duty for that amount, and that was all fine. And then about probably 4 or 5 years after the car was registered, I then got a letter saying, please explain how you valued your car. So because we value it at an amount that would have met with penalties that I owed the government about $65,000 or $70,000 in stamp duty, which was a lot to cop for a car that I originally paid like less than $9,000 for. Anyway, so after some backwards and forwards over a period of about 12 months, I was levied with a bill and penalties. So I had to pay $34,000 for in stamp duty and penalties. But then that was later reviewed through, I had to get a lawyer involved and all that. And I got about $25,000 of that back. So the upshot was, yes, I had to pay more stamp duty than I originally paid. Yes, it was a lot of pain along the way that I had to do, because I had to pay for evaluation for the vehicle and that. So I still maintained that I followed the procedures that DOT outlined on their own website. And I believe that their mode, their objective was to stop people from deliberately cheating the system. And but I think a lot of people and I see motoring enthusiasts and people who build vehicles, buy them at a low price as a project car. I see us as being a bit of collateral damage where some of the boffins at government sort of have decided to, I don't know if that was ever the intent of the rule to catch out people who build vehicles, pay their GST and taxes along the way while they're building a vehicle, and then cop a huge stamp duty bill at the end of it. So so that was my story. There have been a lot of other people who've been caught up in the stamp duty issue. Some of those were probably deceitful, where they deliberately particularly where they bought a vehicle that was done up, and they've had to just cop that one and pay the extra stamp duty and the penalties. But I think there's also some people that have been genuinely caught up in in this situation and have had to sort of fork out money and penalties and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I'm finding, Chris, as being part of a car club as well, is another side as well, and not necessarily even putting the spanner to the car. We have a number of members that have bought, let's say, valuable vehicles 20 odd years ago, perhaps. They were unlicensed at the time. For whatever reason, they chose not to license those vehicles. Some of them were in various states of not running or disrepair, we'll call, but did it require a great deal of funding to get those cars running again. Some of these cars, these guys are too frightened to license them now because of this. These cars, we're not just talking about, some of them are Monaros, some of them are GTs. They're unlikely to have these vehicles licensed at any point because of the fear of the stamp duty. And they don't feel it's fair because they paid X amount of dollars for the vehicle 20 odd years ago. And while they don't feel that they should only have to pay the stamp duty on what they actually paid for the vehicle, they can prove that. However, they're fearful of licensing those vehicles now because of the stamp duty.
Yeah, so the way I understand it is the stamp duty laws are written about the stamp duty applies to the granting of a license, not necessarily the transfer of property. So much like on a house, when you go and buy a new house or whatever, the transaction occurs when you transfer the property. So whereas with the stamp duty as it relates to motor vehicles, it's on the granting of a license in a person's name. So. So, for instance, my cousin built bought a Monaro years ago, and it was in pretty poor condition, but it was still licensed. So he transferred the license at that time. And then, so regardless of what he spends on the car now, because it's already been licensed into his name, he doesn't have to pay any additional stamp duty. So my recommendation to anyone would be, if they're building a car, is to get it licensed as soon as you can in the build process, as soon as the car is roadworthy enough to get it licensed, and then pull it apart and paint it later on. And I think that's just simply, that's not being mischievous. That's just being using the same rules that the government officers have twisted around to catch these people out. It's using those in the same manner.
I don't know. It's perceived in many ways as a capital gains tax. Like, some people view it like a capital gains tax at the end of the day. Capital gains you only pay once you sell. In this situation, is happening when they license, but they do feel that they've been targeted because their good fortune for investing in a car 20 odd years ago, they're paying for that now if they do get. I can tell you there's a couple of cars that might never get licensed because of this reason. So
that does not surprise me in the least. I'm hoping we can do something about it. It seems ridiculous that if you've got a car on code 404, i.e. it's a standard vehicle, and you want to use it for limited use, well, you don't have to pay stamp duty at all. Whereas if you took it to an extreme, that same old vehicle, if that might have drum brakes on it, if you put disc brakes on it, it could be the same, otherwise the same vehicle, but all of a sudden, because you've made the car safer, you're then not eligible for no stamp duty on that car. There's some, that's an anomaly, but there's some ridiculous situations like that I think need to be addressed.
Well, speaking of addressing them, how is the WASMA progressing with their stamp duty review committee? How are they progressing along there?
Yeah, well, sure. That review committee is led by Vicky and by Graham at WASMA. They're the ones who are really pushing it, and I believe that Vicky and Graham will speak to you at a future time to that. But very broadly, it's very early days. They've written to politicians, I believe the Premier, and basically advised them that, apart from Queensland and WA, none of the other states apply stamp duty to vehicles that have restricted use on the roads. So
because I mean, even in the greater, we'll call them the greater public that aren't really aware of or don't have the passion of what we do. Do you honestly think that out there that people mind whether we pay our what's deemed a fair share of stamp duty? I think at the end of the day, it's such a small portion of people in our scene that may have not, and unwilling, not knowingly pay the correct amount of stamp duty. Do you think the Great Arm Wash would be they wouldn't begrudge us not paying the stamp duty in any event?
I would hope not. I mean, you think that the people who are spending money on these enthusiast vehicles are actually spending the money in WA or in
That's
Australia,
correct.
and paying taxes here. Whereas, if they chose a different hobby like going on overseas holidays, none of that money gets spent here, and the government gets nothing out of it. So, I think the government needs to be encouraging people to be spending money here and not creating roadblocks that make them think, oh, bugger it, I'll just go and, I'll go on an overseas holiday and spend my 20, 50 grand or whatever they spend on their overseas holidays. That's obviously, of no benefit to our community from an economic sense.
Yeah, I know it's two different taxes. Stamp duty is a state tax and GST is a federal tax. But can you imagine, like, if the lost GST revenue, if suddenly this scene went away overnight? Like we're talking billions here in lost revenue, because the money that gets spent, if you think about Australia in the modifying scene, it's a large sum of money at the end of the year.
It's a massive amount, and I know that there's a lot of workshops in Perth that would probably just close down. So those people would be without jobs and that. So we want to encourage it. It's a great hobby to be part of. As I said before, there's always a minority that give us a bad rap because of some poor behaviour. But for most part, motoring enthusiasts do the right thing. They're good for the community. They go out and they fundraise and they do bits and pieces. So they create feel-good events. It's great for mental health for people. They're spending time with like-minded people. So a lot of jobs now are pretty stressful, and getting out and cruising around in your classic or custom vehicle is a great stress relief. So
definitely,
there's a lot of intangible benefits to it.
Yeah, 100%. The 180 kilowatt per ton, that's a magical number I have heard a lot of over the last few years. Tell us where that 180, the talk of the limiting modified vehicles to the 180 kilowatt per ton, where that's at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So the for those who don't know, for modifying vehicles and putting in alternative engines or making engine modifications, there's a rule book called VSB 14, which is Vehicle Standards Bulletin 14, which is a national document that WA fall in behind. So that document talks about engine size as being sort of as a way of controlling, I guess, horsepower in engines for modified vehicles. But then in about 2015, and again, I understand it's as a result of complaints from the public to politicians, there was a mandate put to the officers at the Department of Transport to introduce another system to get these high-powered cars off the street. So they introduced, they did their own internal research. I won't speculate as to how they came up with the number, but it was decreed that, like in addition to the car modified engines having to satisfy the size requirements or the capacity requirements, they also weren't allowed to exceed 180 kilowatts per tonne. So there are a lot of vehicle builds where people are expecting to get approval because their vehicle modification application appeared to meet the requirements of VSB 14, yet they were being knocked back on safety grounds. We took particular umbrage to that comment about the vehicles being unsafe and that, because the fact is that they're just not. So, and then as we referred to before, there's always accident statistics and insurance information that demonstrates that these cars, because they're driven by enthusiasts and have limited road use, their actual accident occurrence is a lot less than the average motor vehicle.
Yeah. Just for those that are listening that aren't probably don't know what 180 kilowatt per ton would equate to. I haven't done the maths, and I probably should have. But anyway, the last Commodore, the VF, I think was around about the 230, 240 kilowatts, and that car weighed 1,800 kilograms.
Yep.
So that would fall under the 180 kilowatt per ton. However, not by a lot.
Yes.
So if we're using the last Commodore VF Commodore, beautiful car, as a gauge, we weren't allowed to make much more horsepower or power to weight than that car. That's not a hell of a lot.
No, you're right. And I think the particular concern was when you're putting these higher horsepower engines, which are easy to tune and make more horsepower out of, into older cars that had much lighter bodies.
Yep.
So when the department first started assessing the power of the 180 kilowatts per ton, they were using engine power, but they've now clarified that there's being rear wheel power. So,
okay.
So that makes a difference. So it meant that some of the builds that were rejected over time probably now are deemed to be acceptable.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I want to just branch out a little bit off the notes here. These are a couple of things that I made note of before, and I'm really curious to know from you, Chris, what in your mind, how do you see the future of street machining? Let's just say in the next 10 years. What do you think that looks like in the next 10 years?
I'd like to think that we are seeing the scene grow, but I am concerned that a lot of us in the scene have grey hair, receding hair, and I don't see as many young people coming through. So, and I think that's a bit sad. So I think also the people like myself with the grey hair need to be encouraging younger people into the scene too. So I'll always try and take the time to talk. Young people show interest. I'll always do what I can to help these other people if they show a bit of interest, to help encourage them. And I think we could all be ambassadors for our hobby.
Yeah, definitely.
Moving forward. So I'd like to think that we're in a better place in terms of modified vehicles in 10 years, certainly long before that, where if someone wants to build something a bit more radical, they're able to do that. So I'd love to think we could have a system in place, certainly well before 10 years, that might allow someone to do that. So provided the vehicle's safe and can be driven safely on the street, that's a key thing. I mean, none of us want dangerous cars on the street.
No.
But I mean, I think there's potentially a lot of cars out there, or some cars out there, that may not fit the criteria or the current criteria, but can still be driven very safely.
Do you think we utilize people like Simon Birch, this year's grand champion at Motivation, even Clint Giovanni comes to mind, Rachel as well, Rachel from House of Colour, those sort of people in the scene, because they're younger than me. Do you think we utilize because I do perceive they're just three that I quickly wrote down before we started the podcast, but there's a lot more than that. So, but do you think we use those people to the best of our ability? Because I'm not convinced we do. I think we need to see more of those sort of people sort of leading the way, or maybe, car clubs bringing those people in to do special talks and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that can only help our cause. So I know, Clint's been an integral part of WASMA. Clint's had a lot of history with the Department of Transport. Is very knowledgeable on car modifications. So I'd love to think we use people like that as much as we can for to help get better outcomes for everyone. Similarly, people like Rachel. She's she's out there in terms of her ability to her custom painting skills are fantastic, and being, dare I say, at risk of sounding sexist, a woman in a man's dominated industry. I think it's great to see her out there, doing what she does and doing it really well. So by all means, we should be using anyone that we can as ambassadors, regardless of their age.
Yeah. Well, I mean, her in particular, she has a really big social media presence now. And I don't want to say she's an influencer. I don't think she's an influencer. She probably doesn't want to be an influencer either. But I do think she has a pretty big social media presence now, where I think she can be quite influential in the scene. And I'm not saying we don't. I do think we need to bring some females along for the journey as well. That's what I will say. And being involved in a car club myself, we've dragged as many females as we can along for the journey, but they're still underrepresented. And I think we need to try and get them represented a bit better or more.
Yeah, I think generally my view is that we need to encourage everyone, regardless of their sex, background or whatever. I'd like to see more young people. If we can encourage more young people into the scene, and you look at events like Custom Cars and Coffee is a great event for that, because people go along and they see all sorts of cars there, regardless of whether they're Australian cars, American cars, or Japanese, Asian, Korean cars. They're people. We should be encouraging them to come along and look at other vehicles. So, I mean, I've got an eclectic like for cars. Have standard vehicles and modified vehicles and that, and always take the opportunity to talk and encourage other people to get into the scene. So.
Jason Fuller, that is, has done a magnificent job in that space. I mean, what he's done, the work. I mean, we've kind of missed him. I know he took a bit of time off for COVID-related issues, and he couldn't run events really. Not in a. I didn't think, in my personal opinion, and I agree. I don't think wearing masks at a car show was probably conducive to putting on a good event, so he decided maybe not to do them for a little while. I know I saw a post from him the other day. He's coming back, and we're really looking forward to that, Jason. And I know he gets it. I call it the melting pot of the modified car scene in WA. It really is. It's you walk over there, you see a Lamborghini, and you walk over there, you see a Falcon 500, and then over there's a Datsun 120Y, and over there's a Volvo. It really is. It's a melting pot of all different car cultures, and there's no aggro. It's just a really relaxed atmosphere, and I think Jason, what he's done is a magnificent job in the scene.
Oh, it is, absolutely. And the thing I enjoy most about those events is just going on and catching up with mates and people with like-minded interests. Not necessarily people that you'd see regularly as your mates that you catch up with and go for a beer with or whatever, but just people that you see around the scene. And I really enjoy that. So. Yeah,
definitely. One other question I had for you as well that's off the notes is, how do you see? I just always looking ahead, and I'm thinking to myself, we saw on the weekend, I went to the supercars, and the Utes now, they have LSs in them, and they're talking about how they're becoming difficult to get an LS with the decline in supply of the LS and Coyote. What do you think is going to be the next, not fad, but the next engine or weapon of choice, let's put it that way, for any sort of build?
I'm actually thinking that there's going to be a trend towards people taking electric motors and putting in cars in the future. That I think is, I don't think we're going to see as many electric motor conversions as we did LS conversions or whatever, but I actually think that we're going to see some more of that sort of thing, or an increase in that happening. As you get more electric vehicles that become wrecks or whatever, and there's parts availability, then I think we'll see more of that.
It is. I agree with you 100%. We've seen Ford with a crate electric motor, I guess you'd call it. that's available now. Well, I think they've sold out, but was available at one point. But if the Department of Transport couldn't get their head around 180 kilowatt per ton, hold on to your hats, because this is going to be a whole new ball game for them, isn't it? This is not a.
Yeah, and from our dealings with the Department of Transport, they're certainly mindful of it. That they're going to have to address issues related to EVs. So, and using EVs in older cars. There was a great conversion I saw maybe 6 months ago. It was someone put an electric motor into a DeLorean of all things over in Melbourne, and I thought that was so cool, a bit of a Back to the Future type thing.
Yeah, definitely a bit of irony there. That's
exactly.
That is awesome. I haven't seen that one. Hey, Chris, just getting back to WASMA then, how can we find more information about WASMA? We talked about it before with a website, but you also got a massive Facebook page as well. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, the Facebook page has been up and running for a while, and people can get on. So that started off as WA Street Machines, which is a page that Mick Rack sort of looked after. So that's probably a good place where you can find out some more information, or at least ask questions. For WASMA. But for those, what we really like to see is more clubs come along and get along to the WASMA monthly meetings.
Yep.
And be represented there. And it's I think certainly quite a modest cost for clubs to join WASMA for the potential benefits that they get. And it's all about creating a much wider voice for the community, so that when we do need to go and speak with government, we're not representing a couple of hundred people, but we're representing hopefully tens of thousands of people.
Yep. And so for your affiliated car clubs as well, you also offer a service where WASMA can come out to their meetings as well, and you can talk to their members as well.
We can do that. Yeah. If that helps us to get member clubs, just contact WASMA through the website or on Facebook, and I'm certain that we could get one of our members or one of the executive committee from WASMA out to speak to the various car clubs and explain the benefits of joining WASMA.
Yeah, definitely. No, that sounds pretty good. There's also some good resources I found at your website. So there's links to the C4C application form.
Yep.
Real simple form, by the way, for those that haven't done it yet, because it's too hard to fill out a form. They obviously think it's reams and reams of paper. It is literally one A4 sheet, one side, not two sides, one side. And I think it's like there's a quarter of it's really up to the car club to fill out as well. So seriously, It is the easiest form you could ever fill out. It's going to be the easiest way you're ever going to get $600-700 back. Let's put it that way, because I can tell you now, we jumped to it and I haven't looked back. It's been the best thing I ever did. And you know what the real crazy thing about this is? Prior to me getting that discount or going for it, I actually probably drove my car a lot less. Now that I've got the concession, I'd worked out so from April to December, I think I used the car for 12 club days. And I think for 6 personal days or private days. So all up, what's that? That's 18. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't reckon I used the car 18 days the previous year. So here I am paying a lot less and using the car a lot more. But I'm more vigilant of it now, and I'm wanting to get the car out, do club events, go, and even on personal days, because I don't know, it's just it's the club culture. It really is. And that's what I tell people. Get involved. Do the right thing. You'll feel better for it.
Absolutely. And the clubs don't have to take over your life. So for those of your listeners who aren't in car clubs that are perhaps a bit apprehensive, you get out of a car club what you put into it. So you can choose to do a lot of events or a few events or whatever. But I think that they've moved along a way. Our car clubs have moved a long way from the old style of car clubs where you had a meeting every month and this, and you had to do this and you had to do that. I think most car clubs that I'm aware of are certainly a lot more relaxed nowadays.
Yeah. Look, I don't want to talk about them too much because I'm going to have them on the podcast another episode, but Northern Steel is a perfect example of that. I mean, you really, I mean, Peter and Alison are not going to make you become the president or the secretary, or they'd probably like you to be, but you know what I mean? They're not going to hold a gun to your head and ask you to be the treasurer or something like that.
No.
What more can you ask for? As long as you turn up every now and then to their monthly event at their Joondalup, it's a Saturday night. I think it's all finished by 9 o'clock. Everyone goes home, and it's such a great atmosphere. And I just urge people to get along to that at the very least. There's a car club there it's a WASMA affiliated club. I shouldn't be pointing out one club over another, but at the end of the day, I know some of these other clubs there might be a bit of a fear that because you might not have a Volkswagen, you might not have a Monaro, but that the Northern still take bumpered cars basically. So ticks all the boxes. So anyway, I just urge people to get along and do the right thing and become a member of a car club. Act, belong, commit.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, and I think for most car clubs that are successful clubs, there is a changing over of the guard from time to time. And one of the challenges they'll have at Northern Steel is to is the founders sort of stepping back a little bit one day and letting others sort of take over the reins. But clubs grow that way. I often see in any organisation, not just car clubs, but sporting clubs and that, there needs to be a change in personnel and people who are running things to keep ideas fresh and to keep them fresh as well. And a lot of people who might hold an executive position in the club might have a 2 or 3 year break and then feel refreshed and then want to go and help become secretary or treasurer or do whatever in the future again. All about helping each other out and enjoying each other's company.
Definitely. Hey, Chris, I've had an awesome time. We're going to do it again in a studio. We're going to get probably yourself back. We'll get Vicky back. I'd love to have Mark there as well, and Graham as well, Perry too as well. As many as you can get along with one of the mix or both of the mix perhaps as well. Steve Thomas, we'll get you all back in. We'll get you in a big studio. I'd love to have you all in, and I think we need to have a bit of a powwow, but we thought we'd get this podcast out of the way, and not out of the way, but get the ball rolling, and then maybe in a few months' time you can give us a bit of an update on some of the things that we talked about on this podcast.
Yeah, that'd be great, and particularly things like the stamp duty concessions. Sort of, that's really something that that Vicky and Graham and Mick are running with, and that's a good thing about being the WASMA. There's different people that are running with different things, and I think you need to do that. It's too much for one person to be across everything. And that's where it's great that the organisation is big enough that people can step in to do their role.
Sure. Yeah, no, definitely. Chris, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I know it was over Zoom, but I'm sure I'll see you very soon anyway in the flesh, and we'll talk then. But I really appreciate your time on coming on the podcast.
Look forward to it, Nick. Thanks, mate.
No worries. Take care.
Talk and Power, your motorsport and motoring radio show. Now on 88.5 FM, The Valley Comes Alive. And podcasting across iTunes and talkandpower.com.au.